This is a recording of the NMRA-PCR Coast Division virtual event recorded Saturday, August 22nd, 2020 at 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Welcome to the NMRA-PCR Coast Division Saturday virtual event. This week we have a Waybill system for modular layouts with Paul Ingram and David Baird. And then Seth Newman's going to talk about a Keep Alive circuit and board that he's put together to really make inexpensive Keep Alives. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Paul to kick off and talk a bit about Waybills. Paul, it's all to you.
Okay, good. So what I've got here, this is going to be a condensed version of a full-length clinic that I gave at a previous meeting somewhere. I forget which one. I think it was Coast Division several years ago. So it's about a Waybill operation system, and as most of you I know are aware, if you add operations to your layout, it adds a lot of interest and purpose for yourself and for any friends that you have operating with you. And for many modelers, their first venture into operations is adding some sort of a freight forwarding system, and that often is in the form of what is commonly called a car card and Waybill system. And most of those systems have been developed to route traffic from one place to another on model railroads with fixed track plans. That is a permanent layout of some kind, where the modeler can set up predictable and repeatable operations patterns that use the Waybill system to track car movements in a sort of a quasi-prototypical manner. But when you, all right, so yeah, so that's the title slide. All right. Now fill the screen. Okay, so with modular layouts, we have an additional challenge, and particularly the way I do my modules, not only is it possible to rearrange the layout, and what you see here is 3 selected layouts that I've arranged in different styles, but they're using essentially the same modules. So you can see a typical roundy round exhibit layout at the top. And then the one I did for the Fremont Convention, which has a smaller roundy round, but it's got branch lines going off to the upper left and right. And then finally, the same module is set up with Steve Wesolowski in there, you can see on the lower right, in a point-to-point arrangement. So when you do that, then the Waybill system kind of can get confused because you don't have the usual routing patterns. And then things like 4-position Waybills and things just plain don't work. Now, in addition to that, on my modules, I also have sort of interior, what you might call micro modularity, in that I can exchange the buildings on different modules as well. So now I'd like to go to my module and show you how that works. Okay. Get rid of the slide and go to the camera.
We're not sharing. I turned the sharing off, Paul. We're on the camera view now.
Okay. So if you're on the camera view now, you've got a good shot of the module. I hope you can see that.
We can.
This is one of the ones that was in the other picture. And I chose this particular one because it shows up a lot of the possibilities that I mentioned about interchangeable buildings. But right now I've got just 3 small houses on a module going along the street. But you'll notice that there are 2 positions on the module, one in the back here on the left and one on the right in the front, where large structures can go. And also I should point out what the track plan is doing. Up in the upper right is a single track coming in. But when it gets down to the lower left, that splits and you end up with a double track interface. Now that's fine, but it means you can use it in a couple different ways, but it also means that the operations functions on those tracks changes. Let's start with the big siding over here on the right where the boxcar is parked. And that can be used for a number of things. If I left it blank or just put a street piece in there, that could be a team track. But for this purpose, I'm going to put in a warehouse. So now we have an industry to which we can send something, and therefore we can set up a car card to make that movement. Now, since I model 4 different prototypes all using the same modules, I don't always want to have this North American type car warehouse, which is actually a Canadian one, in there. So what happens when, for instance, we want to go to Switzerland? So I'm going to have a different building. And this is just a freight station. It's an actual model of one in Switzerland. But then I can bring my Swiss beer train in there and load it there and have somebody pick it up. Likewise, obviously I do a lot of the Asian stuff. So I can put in an Asian structure, which is just like a food processing distributor or something too. So all of those mean that you have a different industry there, but they're all on the same module. And since it's different prototypes, the name of the module, that is the station name, can also change too. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to stick with the Canadian one, and we're going to call this module Valhalla, and that's named for the mountain range along the branch line that I'm modeling there. Now, at the other end, the left end, we have 2 tracks. Now, you can attach a double track module to that position, and if you do that, then that space that's there might work very well for a station, and that would become a passing track there. So you've just got a mixed freight or passenger station or something. This happens to be a Japanese prototype in there. But the other thing you can do, you can connect a single track module to the near track, and then that little piece back there becomes a spur. And then you might want to put something on it like a little freight station. So again, now you've got the same station, but you've got different industries in the positions. And a little bit later, I'll show you how the cards are affected by that. But what I needed to do was to be able to have some flexibility. So to do that, I have to take the waybill and modify it. So first of all, let's take a look at a waybill and make sure that we know what we're talking about here, because there's a little bit of a problem with terminology with some of the other systems. Everybody see that freight bill on their screen? We got it now?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a prototype waybill from Canadian National. And as you can see on the prototype waybill, you've got all of the information that you need for the freight movement. And it's all on a single piece of paper, which includes all the shipper information, the routing, the rail equipment, and a whole bunch of other stuff that train crews don't really need to know when they're moving stuff around. But then on the other hand, a prototype waybill usually doesn't give you the exact customer spotting location that you're going to want to need. And of course, the prototype train crews would know where that is, or it would be indicated to them by a freight agent or the shipper. But on our model railroads, the crews wouldn't necessarily know that. So it's common to add that piece of information to our model waybills. So the main idea here is that on the usual conventional model railroad waybill systems, the practice is to separate the waybill data into 2 documents. One is the information about the station and customer location, and that's commonly called, but inaccurately, the waybill. And then there is the railroad equipment card, which is a separate card commonly called the car card. But as we've seen, the proper waybill has to include all of this information to be complete. So the customer card needs to be mated with the car card, and in conventional systems, the usual practice is to put the shipper information card into a pocket on the car card. Okay, now, as I mentioned before, when we get into the modular system, we have some problems because some of that information, particularly the shipper information, changes. Okay, so what I've done for my waybills in order to allow for the interchange of buildings and prototypes and all that is gone to a 3-part waybill. And what I've done is to separate the shipper information and the station information, because the station can change, but can have the same shipper and vice versa. And then there is a car card. And when you put them all together, then you finally get your waybill, which you can see in this chart here. So and then we already looked at the possibilities for the use of the different tracks on this module. And the rationale here is to accommodate the flexibility on modules and how the traffic is generated. And one thing that we've done with some of the places we've tied it, it did seem to also help in this regard is when you've got a whole pack of cards that you're carrying around, if you've got everything that goes in one station together, it makes it a little bit easier to do your work along the line. There's a tendency to, with the conditional systems, focusing on the car card, is that the crews tend to look at asking a question like, what do I do with all of these cards? And then I found in some of the systems that I've tried to use that you end up just shuffling through that whole stack of cards every time you come to a place to do some work. If you have the station card, you can put all of the shipper cards and car cards for that station together, and then you only need to deal with that part of the pack while you're at a particular place. And so the question then becomes, what is the work at each customer at that station? And it also it kind of goes more, in my thinking at least, with the way that the prototype system works, where the priority is on the customer, and the paperwork in this system tends to reflect that, where the rolling stock card, the car card, becomes subordinate to the customer card. And so that's why I've reversed the positions of that. As you can see, the car card goes into the shipper card, and then that goes into the station card, and any of the combinations of car card and shipper card for one location will always be together. So you can see that, and I'll show that in a moment. So I don't have time in this part of it to go through the whole way that the system runs, but pretty much once you get all of your cards set up, it runs pretty much the same way as other card systems, and the crews can carry the cards with them, and we can use card boxes at the various locations, which I'll show you. Or they can also run the system where they just keep a hold of all of the paperwork and work it throughout, and then when they're done, they take it back to the freight agent at the layout, and he can sort it through and set it up for the next session. So what I want to move to now is taking another look at the module, and I'm not going to dwell particularly on a lot of things, but I already showed the combination way card. This is the same one that's on that slide, where you've got the card, and then if you notice down at the bottom, there's a track plan. So what I've done is drawn in that and then marked the two locations for the structures for the buildings to be served, and that way when you assign a shipper card, the shipper card will show you the track and the exact spot where things are to go. So this one is going to track B, which is the big blue station, and it's going to door A. And on the back of the building, there are two loading doors. So you just have to make sure that you spot the car at the right one. And then this is your car, and this one matches the car that's on the module. You can see that. And the way I do the cards is everything is designed in Excel. So you can take a picture. In my case, I just put it on the scanner, scan it, and then size it and just paste it right into the card. And you can designate whether the car is loaded, or if you turn it over, it's empty. I think we both agree that anytime you turn a freight car over, the chances are that it's going to become empty really quick. So that's how that's made. Now, what I can do, I made up another card here for another car going somewhere too. Let's say this is going to here. But if these are both going to the same station, you can take that whole pack and slide it right into the station card with the other ones for that. that station. And then when you get to Valhalla, then all you need to do is take that portion of your card pack and work with it. And you don't need to worry about the other ones. So to keep things sorted on the layout, we did some card boxes. And Dave Baird, who is here, did a lot of the actual construction. He's got a really nice wood shop. And this is a slide that shows the card boxes that he designed to use on the Swiss meter gauge layout. And he's got the 3-part box. This is kind of a prototype in the top slide. And the way he's worked it is that the card slots are wide enough for the customer cards, and the rolling stock cards, of course, are in the pockets on that. But they're not wide enough for the station cards. So when you get to a station, you have to take the customer card out and put it into the box at the station. And that's just fine because now it's where it needs to be. And then down at the bottom, he's made a longer version of that, which he's using for a yard card. And I also have a yard card version of simply what I do is take 2 of my regular boxes, and instead of putting the pickup set out and hold cards on them, I just put track numbers on them. And then those tracks can be used in a number of different ways. Some people use it to sort the cars in the yard by track as you make up a train. Others, you can use it just to sort the types of cars that you have available. Then you can go through there and find a card for a piece of rolling stock that's appropriate for the movement that you want to make. So there's lots of different ways to work that. Dave, do you want to say anything about the boxes and how you constructed them or anything? And meanwhile, I can focus back on this box, which is the typical one I use. David built these for me to design, and all of my modules have a fascia in the front that holds things together, and the back of the box has a channel on it, and that just hooks over the fascia on the module. And then I've also added a fold-up shelf so that when you come along with your pack of cards, you've got a place to work, and you can put the card pack on there. And then on the sides, I've added these containers which have a pencil so you can make notes if you need to, and the skewer for uncoupling also, and they just attach with a magnet on the end. So that's pretty much it, the basics of the system. And I found it to be congenial, and a few times I've used it some places, I've gotten comments, particularly on the use of the 3rd card, which is kind of the unique part of this system, I think. So I do, without any further ado, if David or anybody else, and I know Tom Van Hoorn's on here too, and we've used the system on his layout as well. If they have any comments they'd like to make about their thoughts on the system, I can open it up to them and to anybody else that would like to ask questions or make comments.
Sure, I'll make some comments. The Swiss narrow gauge modules haven't really done too many operation sessions, but the times that we did use it, it was a lot of fun. And what we found is just in general, people really like to drive trains around and switch things. If they're used to running modules that are just kind of a fixed loop and the trains do roundy round, it's fun to see the trains. But when we've had some of the teenager kids of the module owners get to actually run the trains and do this switching stuff, they said, "Oh, this is so much more fun." And they said, "Well, give me more work to do. Tell me what cars to put where." And these card systems work very well. They're super flexible. I don't really have any pictures of us running it because I was so busy running the trains that I didn't take pictures of the card boxes as they were being used. But they're pretty easy to set up, and Paul has all of the files made available for you to print, go into Excel and make up the different things and just print them on cardstock and cut them out and put them together.
Yeah.
So basically what you're doing is you're using a destination card and then a shipper card together for the and putting those together based on the setup of the layout. Is that kind of a
Right.
fair
Yeah,
way to say
that's correct.
it? So essentially you start, when you set up, every module is essentially a destination,
Right.
say, and so you have a destination. Once you set those up, then you look at other locations and say, okay, where does a shipment from here go on this layout we've created? So basically you have to kind of lay out the routes, I assume, as you set it up then.
Yes, that's true. And the basic station card that I showed, there are also a couple other versions of that. There are cards for yards, and you can use that as either for a classification yard or for a staging yard or whatever type of card you want. It just takes the place of a station.
Right.
So you can assign it there. And then there is an interchange card which functions the same way. So as you probably noticed in my layouts, I have a bunch of junctions. I'm kind of junction crazy. So there's a lot of interchanges where I can send stuff to. And those function in the same way. And then in addition to that, there are a few other weird cards. I have a bad order card. I usually leave a few of those at each station. So if there's a problem, you can fill one of those out. And if we go around to the boxes afterwards and find those, we can fix things as necessary.
Paul, do you want to talk about the plastic sleeves?
Oh yeah, the plastic sleeves. What I did was to try and design the cards to use a standard size where I could. So the largest cards, the station cards, are a standard 3x5 card, and the car cards, the rolling stock cards, are a standard business card size. The only one that's the odd man out is in between, and it's roughly a little bit wider than a credit card, but it fits in the slots. And I got those specs, and I got them made for me by a company called Domino Plastics in Bakersfield. So I have several thousand of those. So what you do is you just have to make a template to make the slits in the card, and then you're good to go. So. And I like using the cards. It protects the cards, keeps them from getting dirty, and they slide in and out a lot easier and don't get frayed.
Okay. I've done the operations when I stood up Asian rail once or twice, and as an in terms of my ops experience, I've ops less than 6 times. Can people hear me, by the way?
It's kind of muddy, but if you can get closer to the microphone.
I have a problem. I have to shout over this. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I actually have been a casual operator when Asian Rail was set up at Hiller a couple times. And the total number of times I've actually operated as an operator is less than 6 in my life. And so I found it really easy to use this system in like 5 minutes of, okay, I had been helping Paul come up with a description originally for his Portland presentation, but then when we actually put it up, it was, I go, this is easy, this is fun, you know, he's right. I was like the teenagers going, yeah, operations can be okay. It may not be for me for every day, but anyway, it turns out it's very well suited for even layouts that don't change all the time, like non-modulars, but the ability to turn a modular layout into an operational layout this way makes it like David said, a whole lot more fun, you know, because mostly during times when you're set up at shows, you roundy round, and so long as there's a train moving, nobody walks away bored. They walk away the second your train stops moving. And so one roundy round, meanwhile, can be happening while another one's a freight, you know, train, dropping things off, picking things up, and interweaving them, and it makes the operations a little more challenging, but fun. So all I can say is, from a user point of view, this is a really easy card, really easy to understand and use, because unlike some of the people I know who are logged on right now, like our next speaker, they know upside down and backwards, and I've only done it a couple times.
I've worked with some of them, and upside down and backwards is quite appropriate, actually, having been on Sesame Road.
Yeah, just a side comment. We were looking at doing something for the PCR conference with the modular and a modular layout, and we were going to do essentially think about it as not operations for members, but purely for the public. In this case, it would have been NMRA attendees to the PCR conference, but you do the same thing at a show. And we kind of came to the conclusion that really the best thing to do is just to do essentially in and out switching. So you set a train up with 4 cars, it goes to a location, spots the cars, moves the car, picks up 4 cars, comes back. Then the next person takes that train and does the reverse and brings the first 4 cars back. So it's essentially just an in and out, but to each person it feels unique because they're not actually operating it. So they get a switch list and it's just repetitive. It becomes very easy. But I really like for more operations for fun, I think the card key system you guys have is absolutely great. It's just I think it's a little more complicated to explain to the public. What you have to do versus giving just a switch list that says, take these cars and put them here and kind of figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
Kind of along that line, some of you are probably familiar with the Inglenook switching project public layout, where you've got 8 cars on there and you randomly pick 5 of them and make up a train in a given order. You can use these cards as like a deck of cards, and you just lay out all of the car cards and then you randomly pick them. So it's good for those situations as well.
Yeah, I have something I can comment on. This is Tom Van Horn, and there might be somebody on here who's actually used an earlier form of this system, going back to ancient history here. I first met Paul and Tom Knapp in 1974 when they started Bay Area N-Scale, which was a modular group, where we did end up using this system. And we used to, if you can believe that back in about 1975, 76, people could drive from the Bay Area to Alameda and set up modules at 7 o'clock and do operations until about 9:30 and have a good time. That we used to set up in the 80s at the PCR convention, and I had a module which was 6 feet long. I was trying to demonstrate that N-Scale would work right, and I was using, back then it was still KD magnets. It was just becoming microtrain and couplers, and I had hand-laid track because it worked better than the any commercial track you could buy then. And I would have a train. There were about 8 industries on this module / layout, and I would have a train that I would hand PCR members at the show and say, this is your train and this is what you do. And it would basically have this card system. So I don't know if there's anybody old enough on here to remember me doing that in the 80s who actually did it or not, but it worked for anybody who came up.
I remember that, Tom, and funny you should mention that. I've now put up on my screen the operating system for that old system, so you can see what it looked like, along with the cartoon drawings by Tom Knapp.
I could make another comment about running the Swiss modules, which is that it's really fun to play the role of the sort of train manager. If you get to go around while other people are running the trains and make up things to do, and you just put in some pickups, some cards in the right pocket, and I want to see this silo car get over to that module over there, and you plop it in the right place, and the train crew says, I got something to do. I pick it up and take it over there, and you kind of get to be train master in a way that normally just driving trains around, it's a little bit more random that way. And I would offer, I saw a message, something in the chat window asked about how these things are built. If I can share my screen, I have a picture of the hinges.
You should be able to share, David.
Okay, here we go. Oop. Is that showing up for you guys?
Yep, we see it.
Yeah, I just cut out tiny little spots for the hinges to fit. I also did use longer piano hinge on one of Paul's because just the strength it takes to handle the pressure when he puts the plate down to be able to write on. I think these three were a little kind of wimpy, so a longer piano hinge works well too. But you kind of have to recess a little bit to make it fit flush. If I put my email into the chat, if anybody wants me to send, construction pictures, I can. I don't have, engineering drawings of the things. I just kind of built them one by one for Paul and for me, and just whatever worked.
I do have the sketch with the dimensions and stuff on it somewhere, which I can work up if anybody wants to do that. And I can show you here. This is the bottom of the car box with the long hinge on it. And I must say, David, over time, some of the glue that we used on the hinge didn't hold very well. So I went back and added the screws and then trimmed the tops off on the other side.
Yeah.
So it does help to actually screw them together instead of just trying to glue like we did originally.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how the final boxes came out. In view with the shelf.
Slick. Very nice.
Cool. Well, I think, thanks guys. That was great. I think there was a lot of great info there, both from the standpoint of the card system. I really like the idea of that you can have the station information and the ship to information with the module. You bring the modules together, then you just kind of sort everything, and I think that's absolutely brilliant way to make it very manageable, that transition. And like the boxes and the shelf, a place to sort instead of sorting in the yard on top of everything. So I find myself doing that all the time, sorting out on top of the cars. The other thing would be to put spots on it. If you put on the shelf kind of the spot locations, so you could sort right onto the spot locations, that would be...
Yeah, I can do that too. The problem is the boxes get moved from module to module, but that's why I did put the diagram on the station card.
On the station card. Oh, absolutely. Cool. Well, with that, we're going to throw it over to Seth. And Seth, we talked been about 4 or 6 weeks ago. We had a conversation about Keep Alives, and Seth went off to look at how to make some kind of DIY Keep Alives easier. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Seth.
Well, thank you. Let me see here. Let me grab my, all right. Get you full screen, and here we go, share screen. And whoops, okay. We got it here? Everybody can see that?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, so okay, I guess we use the standard platform. We have a few less glitches with the technology. Let me just kind of take it from where Phil left it. Phil had a need for some simple Keep Alives that wouldn't break the bank, and did some internet research and found a nice basic circuit for a Keep Alive using what are called supercapacitors. So supercaps are something for our purposes between a rechargeable battery and a capacitor. You can certainly build a little capacitor system that you can put onto many DCC decoders that'll give you a few seconds of power to get past a little bit of dirty rail, but they don't do as well if you've got, say, dead frogs, or you need a little bit longer period for it to operate. So the supercaps work, but they have some limitations because while they've got a tremendous amount of capacitance, normally we think of caps in the range of a few to a few thousand micro or millionths of a farad. These are 1 farad each. So that's a tremendous amount of power they're storing. And they don't need a fancy charger like a rechargeable battery would. So that's kind of nice too. The disadvantage is the technology that's used to make them so powerful means that they cannot tolerate a lot of voltage across them. So you have to stack several of them up to get the 12 to 14 volt range we usually expect to operate a decoder. Anyhow, you know, the point is it keeps you running. Here's a version of the circuit that Phil was pointing at. Is by, turns out the article was by Larry Puckett, who has the model railroader column, or at least at various times has done the model railroader DCC column. And it's a nice simple circuit, generally uses fairly common components other than the super caps. The difficulty really was translating this design into readily available components that you could buy from, I use Newark and DigiKey, but you know, virtually any of the electronics part houses that will deal with orders the size of hobbyists or clubs or small manufacturers like myself. One caveat here is that some of the decoder manufacturers may not honor the warranty if they think the problem came from a Keep Alive that wasn't theirs, although that would apply to, you know, brand Y and Z as well as theirs. So just need to be aware of that when you start soldering onto these boards. Most of these guys either have a flat rate repair charge or just a no questions asked warranty. And believe me, there's enough margin in there for them to do that. So
Seth, if I can comment, it's just like a car. You don't install the turbo till it's out of warranty.
that's right. That's exactly right. Or, you know, you buy an old beater and rebuild it, and the whole point of it was to rebuild the old beater. Yeah, I think many of us have had that experience in our wasted youth. This is a much more economical hobby in that respect. Okay, so pros and cons. You know, it's you can build very inexpensive ones. So it's great for a club project where you want to build a bunch. They're not fancy, but the price is right. It's good if you have a fleet. I'll give you some little anecdotes about that. If you space wire them, the good news is it's easy to kind of assemble them to take care of whatever kind of space you have in the cavity in the locomotive. But what's not so good is that space wiring is a hassle. Tends to result in a fragile unit that will fall apart at inopportune times, and usually only manifests itself when all the screws are down. So it's really hard to figure out what's going on and why it's failing. So the solution I suggested was to just use a small low-cost circuit board to do that. It's a little less flexible in size, but we can still make one that'll fit within and, you know, for my purpose, the standard is an HOEMD scale. I was discussing this with some N-scale people yesterday, and the answer is the technology isn't quite there even for the people who want to go do it with surface mount and a whole lot of technologies that are a little beyond the soldering ability of the average model railroader. So anyway, as I say, the question was more finding out what readily available parts and values there were and tweaking the app a little bit. And for that, I followed my #1 rule of getting good at things, which is hang out with people who are better than you, which is basically what the PCR is all about. So I asked the Marx brothers, Schutzer and Guries, and we came up with a couple of part substitutions for the diodes that allowed us to use smaller diodes that dissipated less heat, which, you know, is good news because we're using less power and getting the same benefit. And it also means that the devices are smaller, so we can actually make this thing work. And, you know, anybody who wants to talk about this slide, contact me offline or we'll pick it up in the questions. The prototype, which went out about a week after our initial discussion, went to Guy Cantwell. Here's a picture of it. This is based on some caps that Phil was kind enough to send me. Unfortunately, these tiny little 5mm diameter guys are no longer stocked by any of the major distributors. So the final cap is a little bit larger, but the size, the dimensions are, say again? Are such that it fits nicely into, and I think this is a narrow gauge locomotive. So he's done a tender install. You can see he just wrapped a little tape in the lower right there around the Keep Alive, and it's working fine with the Soundtrax unit. Worked first time. Next I heard from Guy, other than you know, it's alive message, was an order for 5 of the panels, so he obviously liked it. Here's what the final product looks like. On the left, you can see the top and bottom of the board. On the right, you can see it with just the passives, which is essentially the charging and discharge circuit, because the capacitors are big and are kind of fit in between the diodes and resistors, and in an attempt to save some space. So you can see this is a tough thing to assemble. It's got 9 components and 2 wires, so pretty easy to deal with. And again, it's all through holes, so you don't need any special soldering equipment. You don't need to work under a magnifier. You know, if you're comfortable with any kind of electrical soldering, this should be no problem. As I say, my standard was it needed to fit within an EMD shell, and here's an SD40-2 that I've been working on for, I don't know, about 2 years. I had to blow the dust off it to take this picture. You can see the ditch lights, wires. That's what that fuzz on the right is. And there's the Keep Alive, and with a little bit of milling or filing, there's plenty of room to get it in there over a decoder and an Athearn frame. Obviously depends on how much metal's in the frame you start with and all of those issues. Here's another shot of Guy's installation. And here's a couple of examples if you were to build one. So the bill of materials part is, you know, 5 times $1.26 for the super caps is kind of your dominating feature. So you've got about $6.50 worth of caps. Oh golly, you know, another 50 cents maybe of resistors, and this is buying them one by one. I mean, their prices go down rapidly, even in tens. But you do have to buy the panel, so I've got a few options for you on that. You know, the thing that you will need to deal with DigiKey, and by the way, I created some shopping carts for you, so if you want to go buy it, you don't have to go through their part selector and figure out what you need. This is just click on this link and it'll take you to the list of stuff you can order. And I've got one for 1 unit and one for 10 units. What you'll immediately find at 1 unit is you're dominated by shipping. I would suggest shipping it first class mail. It should come out to be $4.99. And there'll be some tariff surcharges and yada, yada, yada. You know, if you buy it this way, you'll be at about 20 bucks. Here's the bill of material, you know, at the 10s. And let's see here, the window showing all the other speakers here is on top of this. So you can make 10 for somewhere around 65, maybe a little bit
Seth,
more.
you can get rid of that by clicking up at the top. There's like a flat bar. If you click
Right.
on it, it'll, yeah, there you go.
Right, right. I just dragged it out of the way. You know, I like to see who wants to say something, so I was trying to be clever and, as usual, screwed myself. So you know, that kind of gives you an idea. So for a couple of guys getting together on it or a club project, this is a very economical way to go. I created, since I've got a little website with these parts, you know, a special for you because I love you price. I'll sell you the panel of 10 for $5. I also bought enough parts to make up some kits. So this is a kit that just has enough stuff to build one. And that's about cost. You know, I've got to pay PayPal on all this stuff. So that's what it comes out to. So hopefully those are some, you know, not painful price points if you want to buy one and play with it. And let's see, what else do we have here? References and links. All the files are up there. You can download it from my GitHub page if you're an Eagle guy and you like it, but you want to tweak something, or you know how to buy circuit boards from your favorite Osh Park in Utah, or any of your favorite Chinese. There's a link to the product page. There's a link to Larry's original article. And with that, I'll take any questions. Put you all to sleep.
So Seth, you mentioned that the classic capacitor keep alives for a few seconds. How long will these supercaps last without power?
Guy said that he could run his, I think it was HON3, might have been just HO locomotive for about a minute. One little test I did is I took a lead in series with, I think, a 1K resistor and charged the thing up, and it, you know, charged up to the point where my bench supply wasn't showing it drawing any current in less than a minute. And then I went off to dinner and, you know, made dinner, cleaned the dishes, talked to my wife for a while, finished reading the paper, and came back and the light was still lit. So
Okay, wow.
Well, just as a comment, so the ones I built one, and actually on an ON30, you know, Bachmann ON30 with a Soundtrax decoder, if you turn the playout power off, the sound stays on. You leave the room, walk down the hall, walk back by the room, the sound's still on 2 minutes later.
yeah, that's
And
consistent.
yeah, and I actually had one run off the tracks on the module where somebody ran it, flipped a switch, and it ran 2 feet onto the next module across the grass. So
I was just going to say that one of the reasons for this is if you have a lift out section or a swing gate or whatever, and you have a power cutoff, you kind of want to know how long this thing's going to run before it runs off the end of your layout.
Well, that has been a concern about keep alives for me always. And I've had a few bad operating experiences where, you know, on older layouts, particularly where maybe some of the industrial areas really haven't been modified since DC days because they just took the cab switching switch out and left it there. I've had some cases where sure enough, the locomotive ran into the dead track. It's not connected to anything and there's no way to stop it. And then it goes and runs way back into the way back where you can't reach it. Of course, the real disaster was where it runs through the stopping section. Now, more modern decoders that are designed for keep alives and have the pads for them, and happily this is sort of independent of whose keep alive you use, do have provisions where they will turn themselves off if they haven't heard DCC signal for a second or two. So, you know, they try to protect against that. I was just reading an article yesterday where apparently some of the Europeans have a trick where in the dead sections they just put a diode in series, and if they start seeing an asymmetric signal because it's blocked by the diode, they decide that, oh, that must be because it was supposed to be a stopping block, and the decoder responds to that. So you need to do a little research and see what your decoder supports.
So the reverse of that is when they're charging, I don't know how quickly they charge. Do they create a surge to your power district cutoffs, whatever you're using?
Well, the good news is no. That's what the little diode on top, and I used a Schottky to have less voltage drop across it, and that allowed us to use a smaller value. So that diode is not in play when you're discharging, but when you're charging, it routes you through a pair of resistors with an effective resistance of about 100 ohms. And that limits you to, since it's about 10 to 12 volts, roughly 100, 110 milliamps. And, generally that's fine. Certainly one at a time, they're not going to cause a problem. I guess if you had 30 of them turn on all at once, that'd give you a 3 amp draw. But, we normally work with a 5 amp booster and a 3.2 amp trip on a PSX. So, I'd say try to have less than 20 locomotives in the block.
Yeah, that's a pretty safe bet.
I have to say on the modular layout, we've probably got 10 or 15 with Keep Alives on it. We turn it on in the morning and it comes on fine. But that's across probably 3 to 4 or 5 amp boosters. But
yeah, exactly. So per booster, it's well under an amp.
Right.
And, that if you're having problems with well under an amp of startup current, you got other problems.
Stupid question number 325. Hooking up onto one of the older decoders, which 2 leads on the decoder do you run through Keep Alive? Is it the track power? How do you?
No, not on the track power. You don't, because then it'll try and filter your DCC. If you can find the bridge rectifier, the output of the bridge rectifier is probably the place to go.
That's on the decoder.
Leads of the bridge. At this point, you're getting into unauthorized surgery, but, that's probably the place to put it.
Okay.
there was a website, I'll go see if I can find it again, that actually had a list of a whole bunch of decoders and showed you where to find the wires. But basically the way they all work is the track comes into a rectifier bridge that's on the circuit board, and it'll be basically 4 diodes. You'll see them on the board, and then the output of that the other way is where you want to connect to, because that's the unfiltered DC power.
Right, exactly. And you get one of the benefits, of course, is that it's, a wonderful filter. I mean, you're just not going to get a better filter. So, a little bit of internal resistance because of the charging resistor, but, it's very good for that. I again echo what Phil said. I have seen this website. I have certainly had a number of decoders show up at my workbench saying, could you put this thing on? And I'm always, sure, tell me where you want me to solder it. But, it's at your own risk. So, on the other hand, if it's that old in the decoder, it probably doesn't owe you anything. And, the worst you're out is a decoder that didn't work very well.
I'm going to add stupid question 327 after Pat's, which is, will the locomotive still respond to the emergency brake on a DCC system, which does the whole layout, everybody stop? Okay, so it will honor that even though it's fully charged. You're not going to see your locomotive running for 3 minutes after everybody else has ground to a halt.
Right. So that's a really good question, because there's 2 different things going on, but the behavior to the user is similar. So in one case, you have the stopping block, which says, I will stop it by removing its power. Well, that doesn't work very well with a Keep Alive, because we've decoupled the locomotive from at least any immediate power interruption. The other one is the DCC command station sent out a calling all cars request, telling everybody stop right now. So as long as you haven't blundered into some place where there's no DCC command available, the emergency stop will work fine, both on the individual locomotive and the system-wide basis.
Now, if you're on a dirty stretch of track and the Keep Alive is keeping it running and it doesn't hear the emergency stop, does the command station repeatedly send it?
Well, the problem...
that's a really good question. Does anybody know?
Well, I don't know if it repeats it, but the problem that you're talking about is if you're in that dead section before the gate, the end of the layout, and you've killed it, that's when you hit the damned emergency button. When there's, and then it's not going to work unless you have, this is a different topic, unless you have Wi-Fi DCC instead of through the rails DCC. Then it would work.
So it's always good to have a physical blockade before the bridge that's out.
Yeah, I think I would use a hinge pin or something,
So just a question.
I could think of some kludges that might work, but, frankly, it's probably better to just be safe and use the mechanical solution.
So, actually on the bridge we did in Pleasanton, we put a relay in to cut the blocks off, which are probably long enough that they would stop. But if you open the gate when an engine was only a couple of feet away, it wouldn't. We have actually talked about just putting some pins that would come up about 1.5 inches, just right in the middle of the tracks, that would just basically, an engine would hit them and you'd sacrifice a little bit of a bump on the front of it, hoping it would slow down, and just connect that to a tortoise to run them up and down. So when the relay flops out, they go up. When the relay goes the other way, they come down. I haven't done it, but I think that's probably the best way to do it to protect it. And by the way, you have to do the same thing when people start doing dead rail, because dead rail we've had a couple of people come with dead rail. The other thing we actually talked about, we have the lift out because we have the relay, was putting a red light up above it that actually would come on like a side, one of those rotating beacon lights that would let people all over the layout know, hey, this bridge is open. We only have one bridge, so you could actually put a couple of those up that would actually turn on so anybody operating would know a bridge is open, just as a warning.
Couldn't it even be something as simple as spring loaded? The bridge pushes the pin down, you lift the bridge up.
I like
the pin
that
pops
even
up.
better. Yeah.
That's no necessary electrical connection. It's just a simple mechanical. Bridge goes down, pushes the pin down.
Yep.
Idiot resistant.
Well, I don't know. You can't make it foolproof because fools are too inventive.
But the other thing you could do, and it didn't do this, but you could do, it's really pretty easy, is you could just run wires a little bit farther and put in 2 more relays and take the next 2 blocks out too. So literally you could take it out so you took everything out 30 feet from the bridge when you open the bridge. And that way, if everybody just knows when you open the bridge, you look and don't see if there are any trains within 10 feet on either side, you open the bridge, they'll never get there. Because,
Is that actual feet or scale feet?
Actual feet, real feet, yeah.
Well, the other thing with having a little longer stopping section is that it gives you a chance of protecting against the guy who's backing.
Right. Yep.
Right, because you may start losing the caboose and cars over the back, long before the locomotive hits the stopping block. So, anyway, like any technology, I mean, there are sometimes unintended consequences, but they're manageable. And anyway, so if you want to do it, I think this is a fairly convenient and inexpensive solution. And hope I've offered some convenient ways to, take advantage of it. And this kind of goes back to my clinic up at the Elks about a year ago. Remember when we could meet at the Elks? And I was showing some clever things you could do with printed circuit boards, using them as the floors of buildings and then a substrate to handle the building lighting. So, you can use these little circuit boards to do a whole lot of things because they're small and they're convenient, and they can be used as structural components also. So again, neat technology, should be in your bag of tricks. If you have a question, there's several of us who do this stuff. Feel free to call and take a look. And there's the board.
Super. Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it very much. That was excellent. So I guess that really kind of our formal presentations for today. In case we lose anyone, I am looking for 2 weeks. We're going to plan on getting together 2 weeks from now and looking for anyone who wants to do a presentation, either a mini clinic presentation, or just take some pictures of your layout and come talk about it. We've done a few of those. And it's a great way. It's almost a better way in some ways than having an open house, because you get to show what you like on your layout, what you didn't talk about it. So if anyone's interested, so in doing that next time, I'll make a plea. So with that, anyone have any great modeling they want to share or anything interesting to share?
Well, I'll go on the interesting part of it. The unfortunate part with the fires that have been going on is, for those who haven't heard, Swanton Pacific is basically toast, literally. Their engine house burned, and they lost a lot of equipment. I think they lost all of their passenger cars. They had one locomotive that was off-site and stored. I don't know if the tender for that locomotive is off-site with the locomotive or not, but they suffered some serious damage. I know the SP Group IO has photos of it. There's been some photos on various Facebook pages. So just be aware right now they are in a really dire situation.
I missed who this was, Pat? Is this the,
Swanton Pacific Railroad up above Davenport.
yeah, okay.
They got hammered really badly by the fire. They've dodged the bullet a number of times in the last 10, 15 years, and this time it hit square on. They just lost a lot of stuff. I don't know what their fixed plant, their track structure is like at this point in time, whether the ties got burned or not. But yeah, they got hammered really badly.
That's a shame. Sorry to hear that.
I don't know if you guys heard, but Roaring Camp is also threatened, and they were out there. A bunch of guys from Roaring Camp were out there over the past couple of days moving their equipment as far away from trees, like in between where the parking lot is, between the station and the engine house. They had people moving sensitive documents off site. So they're also worried about that. Hopefully they'll stay safe.
And of course, any of our modelers that are up in that area, I mean, they're going to be, because there's no way you can move a model railroad out of your house when you evac. So it's going to be interesting. The whole San Lorenzo River Valley is right now one of the major target zones. So we'll see where it falls.
You know, it's interesting. On Monday, we live in Pleasanton, kind of up towards the hill, and on the other side of the hill, west from us, up in the canyon there in Sunol, they had a fire up in Kilcare Canyon, and so we actually went through on Monday getting everything into our entryway to leave if we had to. And it's very interesting to think about what you take from a modeling perspective. Do you try to put modules in a car and take, if you got modules, you take, what you realize is that there's almost nothing you have that's worth protecting. There's very little that's worth trying to get safe. It's very interesting when you think about it.
The technologies, your hard drives, those,
right.
Take those, you've got pretty much all you're going to have, and important papers. And that's, I mean, the rest of the stuff is stuff.
Yeah, we had the fire department come about 5 years ago to our homeowners meeting, and basically they said, this question was, should we try to stay and get the hoses and connect up with the fire, fight? They said, if there's a fire, you just want to get out, take your children, your pets, your most important mementos, and get the heck out, because you don't want to be caught. And if you ever seen some of those pictures, those people driving through a fire, that's pretty scary.
Phil, I've got some slides I'd like to share.
Absolutely.
So we're going to see how well this works. So going to slideshow mode is not going to work. So we're going to have to work off this mode.
You're actually not sharing yet, Earl.
Okay. Hang on one sec here.
There you go.
There.
So what am I sharing?
Your desktop right now.
Top. There you go.
Okay. So Dan Munson was out last week. Seth sent this up. He was doing photographs for the upcoming convention. So they came around and toured about a dozen layouts, taking about 3 hours worth of photographs at each layout. So this is Dan and this is Doug.
Which screen? I think you're sharing. You have two screens?
Yeah.
You're sharing the wrong screen. You're sharing the screen. Yeah,
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Yep, that's great.
That's the bane of all this.
There you are.
Okay, we're even better now, right?
No, great. You're perfect.
Yep.
All right. So this is Dan and Doug over at Ted Stevens taking photographs, and just want to show you some of the photographs of me taking pictures of them taking pictures. Surprising when they start setting up all their lights, how bright the room gets. You think the room is pretty bright until you see their lights. And then all of a sudden it gets really dark when they turn the lights off. The interesting thing is, and Seth mentioned this in another conversation, Dan has a really good eye for looking at scenes. You know, he took pictures from angles that I had never expected and kind of never even thought about taking pictures from. And this is, you know, shooting kind of from up high down into this area, and you get this kind of a view, which is just incredible. So here's again, you know, positioning some boxcars, setting everything up just right, and then taking the picture. One of the interesting pictures he took is this one. This doesn't look strange until you start looking at the lettering right here, and you see it's backward. So this is taking a picture into a mirror. So in the corners, he would set up a mirror with a little spring clip and take pictures into the mirror so that you could get a different kind of angle of everything. So very interesting, very informative session. 3 hours went by really quick, but we had some fantastic pictures.
Some things that I noted in this, and I got exposed to when I was studying photography, is if you're going to take pictures of your layout, have at least one other person there with you, because there's no way you can stand behind the camera and move the lights around at the same time. It just doesn't work. So have somebody there. Can you move that light and aim it this way a little bit so you're still looking through the camera while they're moving the light?
Yeah.
Having an assistant, even if you're doing just for pictures for your home layout that you want to do, have an extra person there. It really helps, and it makes life a lot easier.
What worked well on this also is kind of leapfrogging the setups. Is Dan would talk about what he wanted a couple scenes ahead, and then Ted Stevens and I would be setting up the scenes while they were taking pictures, and spent a lot of time moving cars and locomotives around getting scenes just right. But I think we're going to have fantastic photos from a lot of layouts. Back to you, Phil.
Do the folks there do anything specific about trying to put in shadows when they're supposed to be there, or remove artificial shadows that they don't want in the image? I noticed that last picture you showed of the caboose. I mean, it would probably be a daylight scene someplace in the world, and there's no shadows unless they're at the equator. There should be some shadows somewhere, I would have thought, from the sun.
This is my cell phone photo, not his photo. But I think the answer is no. I think that you look at a lot of the photos in the magazines, there's very little shadows. And the intent a lot of times is to keep the shadows off of the backdrop. So I think it's just lighting the scenes enough that they look good.
Yeah, that was certainly at my layout was the issue, because, you know, there's not a lot of depth there. And the idea was to keep the buildings off the sky. Because that's a lot more obnoxious. But, you know, yeah, there were some low angle ones where the sky wasn't visible and there was a deliberate attempt to use them. The one I sent you yesterday sort of has that effect, if you've got that handy, Earl.
Yeah, let me see if I can get that going here. Hang on.
You also have to remember with photos like that, generally they're not trying to trick people into thinking that a layout is not a layout. I find this with my layout tour videos that I do. People say, oh, but the fascia is in the way. It's like, it's a layout. We're not trying to trick people into thinking this is not a layout. We're trying to show people how good the layout is. And so I think a lot of times photographers like that won't worry if there's a, you know, where the placement of the shadows, except if it's on a wall where it shouldn't be.
Yeah, if we can push you into that zone where you're asking, that's wonderful, but that's not the point.
Okay, let me try a screen share again. Does this come up with the gates for Lehigh?
No, we got your other desktop.
Here's your full desk. Yeah, that's your full desktop. If you drag it over to there, it'll be.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. Well, so I was going to do a little thing on Publisher, but we're out of time. But this was a set of gates that I was making for Seth's layout. You know, we talked about Publisher last time, or PowerPoint, to do You know, Phil did something on interiors. I did something about pictures. I use Publisher as a poor man's drafting program. And I had to make these gates for Seth. So what I did is I came into Publisher and I made a box the size of the gates that I needed. So I had about 3 inches across. I made a box that was 3 inches across, divided it in half, put a reference line for the height of the gate. And you can see I've got the fence post and the horizontals so that I can get these gates square and the right size. The interesting thing is in the corner here, this is a 16th inch rod. This is 20 mil wire. I wanted to have a strong joint here. So the question was how to get, you know, how to drill a hole on the edge of a 16th inch rod. So I came in here, and this is, you know, my prototype, clamped a piece of rod in a vise, took a Dremel and cut just enough of a flat on the top of the 16th inch rod. Then I center punched it and drilled it. And that gave me a hole to actually put the wire into and get a nice strong solder connection. And then this is what the gate looks like once it was all soldered and done. So again, I could get the perfect size and, you know, perfectly square. And this is what it looked like after we went and installed it in the lab. You can see one gate swung open and the other gate's closed. The other thing I thought came out really good is the ground cover in this area. This is actually 3 different colors of ground cover. This was Arizona rock and mineral, kind of reddish industrial dirt was the base coat. I had some, let's call it gray dirt for lack of discussion, that we laid down on top of that, going for like a, I don't know, 80% coverage. And then in the grassy areas like this, we did just some earth, and that went in at about 30, 40% coverage of those areas. And then this is just flock and turf from Scenic Express. And once it was all wet down, you know, it's a very convincing industrial kind of area. Then we came back, and this is a combination of scraping, powders, chalk, and everything else to get, you know, the pathways where people would be walking or cars might be parking. And this is what I think, you know, is missing in a lot of other scenery scenes that I see is, you know, the paths where people walk. And we talked about this a little bit some weeks ago with that picture of the siding and everything kind of being a different color. So again, I thought this was really nice. I wanted to share one other picture with you guys. You know, I get these pictures from Shorpy, and they're a historic picture site. I get pictures every day. Some are railroady, some aren't. And you guys know I kind of like this old stuff. Well, I got this picture. I thought it was interesting. And I saw this coal yard in the bottom left corner. And I'm working on a coal yard, so I went and I zoomed in the picture. And I saw this and go, wow, you know, the tracks actually go into the coal yard. Okay. And then you look at these retaining walls. Well, that's actually the backside of the coal bin. So what I can figure is that these guys were manually unloading gondola cars. That they would come in with a gondola and you get a couple of guys in there shoveling the coal off the cars to the other side of those retaining walls, because you can see the tracks, you know, go all the way back into here. So this picture is circa 1938. So it was just amazing to think of the manual labor that was available at that time. And to think that, you know, manually shoveling out a gondola car full of coal.
I noticed in that picture over on the right side, if you go back to the full view, there looks like there's a streamlined Chicago Northwestern passenger train there.
There's a streamliner in there.
Mm.
The nice thing about all of these pictures is you get away from the subject. Like the close in on the coal yard, you look at the cars that are in the background behind it, and that's some neat modeling information. Look at those looks like a maintenance away car, and you know, just start looking at the things that's in the background, the automobiles, the little details, the depot building, whatever that is over to the right, all of those little things are not the subject, but they're there for you to find. And you start looking at the picture and just go over it in quadrants, and you can start finding things that, oh, that's really a neat idea.
It is, and everything's not flat. You can see where, maybe there's some rubbish over here. I like this funky fence over here, the board at an angle. It's just the variety, and like Pat says, there's tons of details once you start poking around.
When you look at the gate. The gate should have been tweaked a little bit. It's probably been bounced into a couple of times.
I'm sure more than once.
I'm impressed with the quality of the photo from the time that it was taken. I mean, you've zoomed in, and it's not grainy at all. It's a wonderfully sharp photo.
Oh, this is probably a 4x5 negative.
Yeah, probably. Exactly.
Maybe
exactly.
even 8x10, but probably 4x5.
Yeah, a large format camera, but it's a fabulous photo.
It is.
Harold, what was the name of the site that you got the photo from again?
I will put it in the chat.
Okay.
Cool. Excellent. Well, if nobody wants, I'll share something that's completely different. And not that one. Let me start with this one. So one of the guys in the Pleasanton group commented that out in Tracy, apparently UP is storing a whole bunch of engines basically on the siding on the east side of Tracy. So I basically was getting stir crazy last week and decided to run out there. Living in Pleasanton, it's about a 25, 30-minute drive out and back, out there and then back. So this is actually looking from the east end of basically that yard area in Tracy. And this is the beginning of, you see there's a line of locomotives. The track behind this is actually the main line. This is kind of the main spur that the engines are on. And then there's a line of auto racks over here. Hang on, I gotta get you guys pictures out of my way here so I can hit the button. But you gotta get an idea. You can kind of see how far they go off in the distance. But I'll tell you, if anybody's interested, this is Grant Line Road and Banter Road. You drive down and you park and you're right next to them. And then there's a little bit farther down. If you look down in this picture, you can see the overcrossing way down there at the far end. About 2/3 of the way down to that overcrossing. At the end of this is that Amazon warehouse off here to the right, I think. You can pull in and park there and walk in. And I got some other pictures there. But this is basically the line of them just kind of shot. And then I drove down a little bit further or I actually took a couple more pictures. But the amazing thing is when you've got, I think there's probably at least 50 engines sitting there. You get an amazing amount of detail of how different engines weather. The other thing that's really interesting is the gray paint colors that clearly were two different batches of gray paint. You can kind of see across them and the different paint schemes through the years. These seem to be all
shiny and new.
They seem to all be EMDs of kind of a certain era. So I'm just wondering if they're starting to take those out of service but didn't want to get rid of them. I like the rust on this one particularly. So
they're all 60s and 70s, they're probably ready for a rebuild or, retirement.
Or scrap. Exactly. So this is on the north side. You kind of come down right by the Amazon. There's a big Amazon warehouse, and I came down by it and parked on a circle there and walked about 100 feet to this point. And you can actually see both ways from here in just a second. So this is looking out to the east. And so you can kind of see how far they go to the east. And then this is looking to the west. And they run almost all the way to the overpass there.
Ooh.
And if you look, it's kind of interesting. You see it on this picture. I took one. You can see the tumbleweeds sitting underneath the engines. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. The other thing I saw there that I thought was also very interesting, and you guys may have seen this before. This is actually, I normally get off when we've driven up on the old road there that goes up to where Grant Line Road is. There's a turnoff where you go to the Delta. We used to have a place, the Delta. So I used to drive that all the time. But if you go straight on Grant Line to Tracy, you actually come to this overcrossing. This is actually the WP line on the top. And they built this overcrossing. If you look at that, this is actually the ideal prototypical solution to that narrow crossing angle overcrossing we have on so many layouts. Because if you look at it, this is actually a picture looking at it from kind of the west, I guess. This is all just that part that sticks out. I mean, you see, this is the side that comes off the wall there. This is the other side here. This is the roadway here that when it was built, this was the roadway. This other side was actually the SP line that ran underneath. And when it was built, the road didn't go through here because the railroad tracks came much closer over here. And you'll see that in a few pictures. But actually, you know, you could do this very much, that idea of having a narrow undercrossing. I've just jumped through these. I took a bunch of pictures just for detail to get the details of it. And then I stopped, I went away and did some other stuff, went back and took some pictures later. This is actually an engine that was a train that was parked on the Altamont when I went by. So it's actually, you know, you can see 2 engines and I think 7 stacked cars was waiting there on the siding. And so kind of an interesting ability to run a prototypical train. And these engines, by the way, are all the GEs versus the EMDs that were in the other one. And then I came back to the bridge, and this is actually some shots from the other side. This is looking west. And you can kind of see how it narrowly comes out there on the curve. And then the road here, and the one I really wanted to get to, I took a bunch of pictures underneath. I'm sorry, I'm just going to jump through these. Is this here, this is actually the old SP line that went underneath. And if you step back here, you can actually see from the curvature, it didn't curve the track the way this road curves. It curved over and came really close on the other side to where that road was going through. And so this is actually looking back along the main line, and then this is pulled back a little bit further. And you can kind of see the curvature would have carried it very close to that center pier of the bridge. But anyway, I thought it was an interesting.
Bill, can you go back one picture for a second, please?
Oh, sure.
One more back.
More back. And by the way, if anyone wants any of these, just
right there. No, go forward one.
Yep.
There's the use of those pieces of rail that you cut off that you were going to throw away. And the railroads did that. Nothing went to waste. Real great use for this stuff, and it's a detail that a lot of people won't pick up on, but that makes it a lot more prototypical, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and if you're doing modern era, the just a very thin piece of rod with the little orange at the end, and you've got your fiber optic right-of-way marker.
Yeah, but I mean, this type of stuff, you got that code 70 rail when you're with code 100 or code 55. If you're using 83 or 70, and you know you've got something to use. Just that light rail that can't be used for trains anymore, I'll throw it away.
Yep. But anyway, you know, I was saying about, you know, if you go back to even the Gore Undefeated, the way the tracks came underneath there, you know, you could use the 2 portals there, one for the main line going on and one for a siding going into the center of a loop. You know, if you did a kind of a double loop around with a crossover in the front. So basically that was those photos. I did want to show, this was, I think I showed this last week. This is the dock I'm building. And this was a printed building. I built one, the first one I built, I decided was too big. And so this was actually some smaller versions. And this was with the decking on the dock. And kind of I'm just some stand-ins for the equipment that's going to be there. And this is kind of a picture from the other side looking across at it. So anyway, that little modeling and a little prototyping. It's a fun drive out there. Pretty interesting to go out there and look around. So even though it was smoky.
Question, Phil, what did you use for the barnacles on the pilings?
They're actually medium ballast from Woodland Scenics, 2 kind of darker, 2 colors, and basically took just a real cheap brush and white glue and kind of dabbed it on, and then just dropped the ballast over it, had it in a tray, and dropped each color around on them to get them all colored, all covered. Yeah, it actually came out, you know, if you actually look at it, I think it came out pretty reasonable.
It did, yeah.
There's and yeah, you can't see it too well in these pictures. Let's see if you can see it in this one. If you look right here, basically I put in piping for all the feeders to all the tanks from here. And then there's a steam pipe that runs from the cannery next door to run a steam pump in there to distribute the fuel. We go back here, I'll show you. This is really what it looks like, kind of the scene. This was much earlier, but the fuel pier is here, and this is kind of the causeway that comes across. And then this now is, there's a tank car sitting there. There's a siding there. That's all done now, so. Anyway, hopefully for the next time we get together, hopefully for the NMRA convention, we'll be able to have modules and have a place to show things and run things. That was a long pause.
Everybody trying to someone else to say something.
Everybody looking for the unmute buttons.
Just
Okay.
comment on those, on the locos. They're probably going to be scrapped eventually, because most of them would take a lot of retrofitting to bring them up to the new EPA standards. They're pretty obsolete for that. So it looks like it's a deadline for the scrapyard eventually.
Or they're hoping for a business upturn.
Yeah.
Well, they may be storing them for a rebuild program. That's the other possibility.
Yeah.
UP is storing a lot of locomotives all over the place. So it could also just be, just be the storage like you guys are saying. I've seen in the, in the yard in Salt Lake City, they have hundreds of locomotives just sitting there because they've had a pretty big downturn in business too. So.
Yep. Okay. Since nobody else is going to do it, I'll share some other pictures from out there that actually I thought were pretty cool. This is actually the switching at where that train was. You'll see it in a second. This is at the far end. I actually took some pictures to look at the switching, but I thought with the hills there, the colors came out pretty cool. But this was actually, if you look at it, these are the two spurs, the main line here and the siding coming there through Altamont. And these are the switches coming off of the sidings. And there's the entry switch down or signal down at the end.
Is this by that big warehouse that's right at where the town of Altamont used to be?
Where is it? Is it Altamont? It may be Altamont is actually the name of the town there. There's a little town and a gas station there. And then there's, yeah. And I happened to be up there. I walked up to take those other pictures. And while I was up there, the ACE train came by, which was kind of cool. So I got some pictures of that as it came by. And yeah, that was the building you were talking about?
Correct. I think that used to be a school district storage building of some sort.
Yep. And then this was that train that I took a picture of earlier there that was still sitting there. And then I took a couple of pictures of this because this just seemed to me to be most impressive. This is the main line that comes over the Altamont where the ACE train just ran over, and it runs across the concrete side of this trestle with just the little wood supports on the ends. But if you happen to be on the spur, you're on I guess it's last millennium trestle, maybe 2 millenniums ago. But it's kind of an interesting shot.
Well,
two centuries, I hope you mean.
2 centuries, yeah, not millennium, 2 centuries ago.
The highway was the Lincoln Highway.
Yep. Exactly. But it's just interesting it's out there. And I thought these pictures actually just the colors came out pretty interesting with the because when I took these, there was a bit of that smoke in the air, and it gave them kind of a surreal almost look of the colors in the pictures. So, but anyway, it's a fun afternoon trip to go out there. Anybody else got anything interesting to share?
I don't know how many people are interested, but the latest edition of Model Railroading with Jack Burgess series of videos that I made came out today. So if you're interested in watching that, it's funny because earlier, I think when Earl was talking, yeah, it was Earl talking about that old photo, and Pat was mentioning, you know, look at all those little details that you can find that you can add to your scenes. That's what the video is about. I almost chimed in at that time, but Jack went around the bottom part of his layout showing stuff like that, and then he went around the top of his layout showing stuff like that. And today's video that came out is the one from the top of his layout. It's pretty cool.
Cool.
Where is that? Is that on the Model Railroader Video Plus?
No, that's on my YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the chat window here. If anybody's interested, they can go look at it there.
Okay.
Well, I guess if everybody's kind of wrapped up on commenting, maybe we should wrap it up. Is anyone interested in volunteering? Oh, James, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't going to say anything. I'm ready to wrap it up too.
Okay, cool. Does anybody want to volunteer? If anybody wants to volunteer to do something 2 weeks from now, please contact me, send me an email. It's really easy to do a quick layout tour, and we'll do a share beforehand to make sure we got all the shares good.
We'll take over the last 3 years.
Okay, well, with that, I think we're going to bid everyone adieu. Thanks very much to Paul and David for the presentation and going through the card system. And thanks, Seth, for the Keep Alive. I think that's a great and definitely a cheap way, an inexpensive way to add Keep Alives to your engines. So with that, thanks to everyone. Everyone have a great couple of weeks, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good to see you all.
Good to see everyone. Thanks.